Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are joining us, and welcome once again to February's third teissTalk. We are here again. We're going to be talking, well, my favorite topic, AI, and my favorite subsection of AI, agentic AI today. Before we get stuck into that, a few of our standard house notices. If you are joining us from LinkedIn, welcome, welcome, and thank you for joining us. However, you will be watching us on a slight delay, and so therefore will not be able to ask a question of our panel. And that's important. So if you do wish to ask a question of our panel, please just head over to teiss.co.uk/teisstalk, where you'll be able to sign in and join from there. Now, why is that important? Because you will see a little chat button around about here on the screen. And from there, type a question to our panelists, and whichever question we find the funniest, the most engaging, the one that makes us cringe, the one that makes us think really hard, or the one that makes us say, don't know, I'll email you once I've checked with AI. Well, you could be in the running to win a teissTalk mug, much coveted. Did you know even most panelists don't have a teissTalk mug? So if you win one, you are, well, you're one above the panelists already. Talking of which, let me now bring our panelists onto stage. Welcome, Tim, Satyam, and Derek. Hello, Tim. How are you?
Hello, I'm aggrieved I don't have a mug, but otherwise
Well,
I'm in good form.
very good, very good. Yeah, I think all the panelists are. We're going to form a union, something like that, and demand better mug conditions. Satyam, how are you? Satyam, I think Satyam's on mute.
Thank you so much, Tom, for inviting us over the
That's
podcast.
all right. No worries. The AI overlords decided they weren't going to let you speak then. And Derek, welcome.
Good to be here from sunny Dundee, up in the
Fan-
northeast of Scotland.
Well, now I know you're lying because it's never really that sunny up there, is it? Uh, so, um, so Derek, I should thank Derek and Checkpoint, who are our sponsors this week. So that tea, coffee, and biscuits that you're drinking and eating, well, you're very welcome, and thank you very much, Derek. So why don't we get stuck right in? Let's get on to the news item. It is from our friends of the show at Info Security Magazine, and the headline reads AI assistants used as covert command and control relays. Now, this smacks to me, brief reading, because as many of you know, I'm not that technical on these subjects. But this says to me, and brief reading, that, well, actually, fancy new technology has fancy new vulnerabilities exposed in it. This is, again, one of those headlines that we shouldn't be surprised of and should expect a few more of. Isn't that the case?
And I think we'll see a lot more of these type things. It's interesting. I'm not technical either. I do understand what the piece of research is and what it's trying to say, but it's very much using vulnerabilities in order to actually deliver command and control type attacks that are using the standard uh, LLMs that are open for anyone to use. And that's why it's quite dangerous, I think, because it's hard to actually stop these type of attacks when you're using services that are available, they're open, you don't need any APIs to access them. So the attacks, there looks nothing dangerous about the attacks at all. It just looks like it's generative AI that's been used. But of course, they're actually being able to actually hide within that generative AI the details. All they need to do is infect a machine, open up a standard browser, and what they're actually saying then is they can actually start to pull leaked data across from corporate networks. So yeah, a very dangerous thing. And I think what it shows is if you use that technology, you need to make sure that you put proper guardrails around everything that you're doing.
Yeah.
Runtime security probably meant that wouldn't have been an issue, I suspect.
Yeah.
But there'll be
So,
better AI experts than me, Tom.
You're,
And as
you're
Derek mentioned, there is no vulnerability and no exploit. And then also the attackers are able to abuse the entire AI system and make them into the C2 control channel for malware distribution. And these things are happening because everything is real and every industry is requiring AI. But AI needs to be, integrated and implemented in the safe way. We should be focusing on the trust, not just the speed, which can be, of course, bring in with the help of AI.
Mm.
And your intro, Tom, was telling because, in a sense, it's not a surprise. New technology creates new vulnerabilities. We've known that for years. But the speed at which this cycle is happening is becoming unmanageable. So, if you say within my security team or within my risk management team, we're going to be looking at new technologies and thinking about what it means for us, you don't have the luxury of much time before people want to start using it. And people may be using shadow AI before you're aware that they're using it, before you've encouraged them to use it. The other thought that occurs to me is this is quite an interesting example. It's not one I would have immediately thought of. We've spent a lot of time thinking about how might your tools not do what you expect them to. I hadn't thought of your tool might be an attack vector for somebody else to get in and use it as a command and control relay. It reminds me how much imagination we need to bring to risk management. Risk management is often thought of as a thing where rigor is really important. Checking everything is important. Checking every aspect, where you want lots of people working for you who are very fastidious, but we also need people working in our security teams who are very imaginative at thinking about the ways that something could be abused or misused or used as an attack vector.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I'm going to come back to that because I want to explore that. That one hadn't occurred to me, but I think to follow up on Derek's point, that it seemed there's plenty of LLMs out there that have been made specifically for attackers to use, for the criminals to use. They are aimed at doing nefarious things. The model is not going to tell you I can't do that because that's immoral or whatever. And hey, we've all tried to put those kinds of prompts in our large language models, right? So there are safeguards in there. But what this appears to do is just allow the use, as Derek said, of a regular, a regular large language model that's already out there in the public and should have these guardrails in place in the first instance.
Yeah, I think as Tim said, it's the pace. It's the pace that we're seeing two things. The pace that we're seeing these services being available, and it's the pace and scale that we're all using them at. And that's where I think we see that the increase in risk. And this is what we're seeing with AI, Tom. I think AI is not just introducing an additional threat landscape that we didn't see before. It is definitely bringing something at scale. But what we're also seeing it's doing is it's scaling the traditional vectors we've got at the moment. So it's actually increasing the threat we see from vulnerabilities, from identity, from third parties, etc. as well. And this is what it's actually doing. The pace of the AI is magnifying this whole new vector that we're now actually seeing as weaknesses, and everything we had before is also magnified. So we've got that double-edged sword of threat, which I've never seen anything like this happening before.
No, exactly. In fact, when we're asked what kind of risks do I need to think about, I think it's useful to sort them into two buckets. Existing risks that we already knew about that are now being made worse by AI. For types of fraud, types of security attack, types of privacy abuse. We've had controls for those things, but they're attacking us in a different way now, and the bad guys have got better tools. And then there's new risks we hadn't thought about before, from bias or hallucination or autonomous agents that start doing things we didn't ask them to do. So we've got to figure out new safeguards for those new types of risks. So it's quite overwhelming if you're not careful. And the other thought you just triggered, Derek, is that management teams in companies are under a lot of pressure to say we're using AI. Everybody wants to be able to say, our product, our chatbots, our customer service has got AI inside now. And so things are being rushed to market before some kind of fairly obvious safeguards are put in place. My favorite example is a New Zealand grocery chain. You may know this one already, but a New Zealand grocery chain called Pack and Save rushed out a recipe plan, an AI-driven recipe planner that would tell you what you could make out of ingredients that you would put in, and it started delivering toxic recipes. Probably, I'm guessing, kids were typing incongruous ingredients like, if I type in swimming pool chlorine, what will it come back with? Answer, chlorine gas. So it would tell you how to make chlorine gas in your kitchen, or other, either unpalatable or toxic items. It would be you would have thought fairly obvious to put a filter on the outputs of that model to test for things that are harmful or unpalatable, but they wanted to get it out to market. And of course, they then get on the front page of the newspapers for the wrong reasons.
Yeah,
Right.
the issue as well, Tim, I think you touched on something interesting for me, which is there is the pressure from the top to push forward and to have that commercial advantage from this technology. But I've been working in security for 30 plus years. We're all experienced security experts. I didn't come up in an AI world. That's not my background.
Yeah.
I'm not an AI expert, but all the boards I work with, they look towards me to say, where's our digital and security leader? They need to now assure us around this technology. They need to tell us we're safe, we're designing the right principles. They need to talk to us about the level of risk. That governance is difficult because this is all such a new technology going at pace that I know very few CISOs that say to me they're an AI expert or they're an expert in AI governance and securing.
Yeah.
And that brings a different level of risk as well, Tom.
Yeah, I think the thing that occurs to me is I always used to say, well, AI doesn't bring anything new per se, it brings scale and reach. But to your point, Tim, I think it brings scale, reach, and a whole bunch of risks we haven't even imagined, which that's the scary part. We always used to think it was just the same stuff, the same, bigger and further, etc. But you're right that, I think this is an example. I think the pack and save example is an interesting one, albeit a non-malicious one potentially. And there is a link in the notes, in the chat to an article covering that. But even though, non-malicious, non-architected, but that's still a huge risk from a business perspective. Getting yourself front page of the news for making chlorine gas, for instance, not a good look.
Not a good look, exactly. And I mean, to your point about risks we hadn't thought about, deepfakes is sort of, again, broadly in this domain that, enabled by generative AI. I was talking at an event, I think it was an audience of finance directors, and I was talking about fraud. And I said, we're going to see all kinds of interesting new fraud now, where people can much more easily and much more plausibly imitate your bank manager or one of your creditors or your boss telling you to make a payment. And someone put their hand up and said it's already happened. And I hadn't spotted yet, it was the Arab deepfake fraud, where one of their regional finance directors thought he was on a call like this, including the group finance director, was told to make a payment. He makes the payment. He discovers after, and he's absolutely certain he's speaking live to the CFO. So nothing could possibly go wrong. And he makes the payment. And of course, it's a fraud. And since that time, we've seen numerous of those. One of my clients has suffered a similar one. You're seeing fake WhatsApp messages, fake DocuSign domains sending you contracts. So it's a much harder world to navigate very quickly. And again, we don't have controls for that kind of thing that we can easily bring into play.
Yeah, they're all soft controls.
Yeah.
Right. As Tim mentioned, without controls, of course, security will be at the lower level, and every organization that's shipping the AI without security by design, or maybe whenever the integration or implementation are going on, they are paying, I see, twice. Once for when they get it integrated and implemented, and second is for the security when they face the challenge, because everything is coming to the AI, it's the prompt and the input that's being received from the user. And as soon as one process the information, it could be your PII or maybe any confidential information within the organization. So having the shadow risk, of course, is one of the point. Then the other thing is the capability and the permission that we are providing to our AI system nowadays. Nowadays, we have our APIs, our tools, each and everything is nowadays connected with the AI models. Your email system is connected to AI model. It's all about typing those prompts and making the injections to the entire LLM models. So I see spending time with trusted security practices for AI governance is a great option.
Yeah. There's a comment before we move on to the panel proper. Andrew's made a comment about there is a fun conversation to be had about lack of labeled vulnerabilities in AI, but they have abundant security criteria to be listed through incidents and research papers. Is that enough? I wouldn't have thought that would have been.
It's a start. I don't think it's anything like enough. The once again the pace of what we're seeing with innovation is just left normally what we'd see with controls, guardrails, how we protect us. It's left it way behind, and
Yeah.
that's what the problem is with this. So yes, that that there are things to look at, but it's
Yes.
in
Yes,
many
bomb.
ways, the gates are open, the horses are out, everything's bolted,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I think it's trying to now reduce the damage, make sure that we can actually try and create as much resilience as we can within organizations. But yes, unfortunately, I think we're playing catch up.
Yeah. Mind
Yeah.
you, we did generally with software on the whole SBOM, the software bill of materials that we're asking all of our vendors and third parties to supply. We didn't really do that up until about 15 years ago anyway. So we were playing catch up on that, and now we're just playing catch up on this. It's almost like we haven't learnt the lesson.
There's something about human nature there, isn't there? We keep getting hit in the back of the head by the
Yeah,
next
that's
new
right.
risk.
And
Um,
stop, don't do that. Stop, don't
humans are
do that.
humans are very good at being diligent about the last risk to
Yeah,
crystallize, not thinking about the next risk to
yeah,
crystallize. Um,
yeah,
I'm looking at the question in the chat about chlorine gas is probably a newsworthy outlier. What are the more common fundamental security steps that people are skipping? That triggered a thought in my mind, which is one of the problems here is shadow AI. So
yeah,
we've built up controls, we've got product controls, we've got, because of GDPR and so on, we've built tests for our applications before they go into production to make sure they're compliant. But there's things which are just bypassing all of that, driving around the outside of the toll gate, as it were, and
yeah,
ignoring the controls we put in place. That's a persistent headache. I've seen that as a consultant. I've seen that when I was in industry, that there are vendors that are very clever at selling to someone other than the normal channels, so that
yeah,
you don't know what you don't know when you're thinking about where your controls are applied. Plus, as we said earlier, when a new application comes into being, there's a lot of pressure to use it. There's a lot of demand from the business to use it if it's going to enable you to give better customer service or launch a new service. It's quite hard to withstand that pressure,
yeah,
because you get business people saying to you, "We're going to get left behind. We're going to have to take a bit more risk if we're not going to be left behind." So it often feels like we're balancing. It's not like we're trying to minimize the risk. We're trying to balance different risks: the risk of being left behind versus the risk of rushing ahead when we should do more testing or do more, apply more controls.
yeah. And in fact, that leads very neatly into the panel proper when we're talking about overlooking those fundamental security and data controls that lead to the failures that we're seeing in these headlines. How are we missing these fundamentals quite so easily? Just because it's brand new technology, and you mentioned shadow AI, we've had shadow IT, well, since IT was invented, let's face it.
Yes.
I mean, even when the word processor was first pushed out there, people still kept their typewriters, right? Because their secretaries and their typewriters because they didn't want to learn this new technology. So again, this is not like a new thing. We should be getting a little better at addressing some of these fundamental failures.
Yes.
I think the guidance is out there. I think there is some guidance out there. But when I talk about fundamentals or foundations for what we should be trying to do, I talk about five pillars here. I talk about one which is still around identity, but it's we can use the AI. Are we securing the AI's access to user accounts, to the data, to the workflows? Satyam touched on that as well. And then it's the data that the AI can see. Do we understand, is there a classification in place, access controls? Have we got DLP for the prompts, etc.? We need to be looking at that as well. And then the actions, what's the AI actually allowed to do? What can it transact with? Have we got policies, code, guardrails in place in that space? Runtime controls would stop a lot of what's going on with the prompt injection and jailbreaking, and then wrapping all this around with that governance model I talked about earlier, with trying to actually understand from a risk classification and logging of outputs, actions, etc. They're five simple pillars or steps I tend to talk about, and I think they would help understand what we're doing in that level of risk and what we should be doing about it. But again, it can be quite complex to try and put that in place, given the pace we're trying to deliver that.
And
There's a comment. Oh, sorry. Do go on, Satya.
As Derek mentioned, like it's all about having the prompts, and the prompt injection is like one of the really good technique that attackers use nowadays. Maybe sending up a PDF to the AI assistant, or maybe if you have anything as an AI integrated to your emails, or maybe tickets, they can send some of those tickets with a couple of the prompt injection, and such things can actually lead to the entire system compromise. And there are certain other vectors, such as maybe getting the access to the cross tenants, or maybe having the uh, entire LLM model compromised by the help of those inputs that we are giving to those LLMs, and not having the boundaries like one of the things. Then the shadow AI is second. Then we can of course mitigate with the help of the tools and the other controls that we can bring into the organization. But
Yeah.
trusting LLM model doesn't know like when it's going wrong. It only knows like how you are sending the inputs and how it can actually process it further. It just goes and follows all the steps that you are inputting to the AI assistants. So
Yeah,
we
one
need
thing I
to,
didn't touch on there,
it's
just
all about the trust.
yeah.
We need to make
Well,
sure that trust is there.
yeah.
Yeah.
One thing to add on as well is making sure that you're building in some sort of kill switch into this, behavior-based anomaly detection. So if something's starting to look weird, ideally you'd want a control in place, some runtime control that's going to either limit this in some way or add some timeouts, sandbox what's going on. I guess what I'm saying is moving from not trusting static testing of this AI and making a much more dynamic testing so that we've got to actually understand what's happening in real time.
I mean,
Well, I think
that idea of moving
go
from
on.
static testing to dynamic, I think, is really important because in banks, for example, they've had this concept of model testing, model controls, model risk management for a long time. And all of their methods are basically about testing the hell out of a model before it goes into production. And of course, that paradigm doesn't work any longer. We've got models that aren't stationary, that aren't deterministic.
They change every few minutes.
Yeah. So testing before you go into production is like only like 1/10 of the job. What actually monitoring and acting and having a kill switch that pulls it out of production the minute it starts generating bad outcomes is really what you need. And that it triggered a thought that there's an analogy here between the way individual humans learn and the way our security teams need to learn. People talk about individual learning. Well, they talk about people having a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. People who the fixed mindset, I know what I know and I'm just going to put it into practice very, very, with high fidelity, versus a growth mindset that says, I want to keep learning new things and adapting what I do. And I'll make mistakes that way, but I'll be able to grow and I'll adapt. And of course, we're often encouraged to move to the growth mindset if we're going to, you've got to be a bit brave to do that because you will make mistakes, but you'll learn. A bit like learning a new language. You will make mistakes, but then sooner or later you'll be bilingual, etc. I think that analogy applies to security teams. We've got to get outside the notion that we have rules and procedures and standards. Those helped us get to where we are today. I mean, we don't want to throw them away, but if we stick with rules, procedures, and standards and a fixed risk appetite, we will fail because we're not going to be able to adapt fast enough. We won't think of the things that could go wrong and figure out how to respond to them. So something which is much more agile and around monitoring and tracking it. And we were chatting just before this started, a bit like the way we manage people. We've always known people aren't deterministic, so we don't manage them by imagining we can train them once and then forever they'll do what we want. We did think that's what computers did or applications did.
Not anymore.
Because it was what they did. Not anymore. So we've got to adapt the way we manage applications to be more like the way we manage people, which is, train them, test them at the beginning, but then have some appropriate form of oversight and a little bit of testing and redirection over their lifetime.
The cynical in me, or the cynic in me, says, when you say there's, rules, procedures, and standards are out of date, and they're just not up to date enough. What hope have we got with regulation in that case? Because by the time, a regulation, which is a good way of actually protecting citizens of a nation state, for instance, the EU, I know we often poke fun at the EU with its regulations, but it does, GDPR pain in the backside, does a really good job of protecting our citizens, right? But that sort of stuff is just not going to fly in this world. And I want to pick up on a comment again, another one from Andrew, who I'm just saying is very much in the lead on the mug race at the moment. But Andrew's saying there is a lack of transparency within AI for us to properly identify the risks to handle, such as, for example, products and services that embed AI into everything, don't exactly tell you that they did so all the time, and then ask for your privacy settings for your data. This lack of transparency greatly contributes to us playing catch up. We don't even, well, how can we know what we don't know? If you see what I mean, to break Donald Rumsfeld.
If you try and buy or transact or consume a SaaS-based service at the moment, and that SaaS-based service doesn't have AI into it, I don't know which ones don't. Every service is out there that we're consuming as part of our back-end business, not even worrying about front-end. It's all AI's been built into everything. Now, I totally agree with Andrew. We're buying that service without actually understanding what has been exposed within that service. And again, it's really difficult to know, is that home built? Is it what are they consuming? What's been built up? I totally agree, which is it's everywhere. It's being advertised as this is why you need it, it will make you much more effective. We know in order to do that, it needs to train itself and needs to ingest our company assets, our company IP. So that means it does need to be interfaced through an API or whatever interconnect into our corporate data. And that adds immediate risk. And I think because I talked about the immaturity of our frameworks and regulations at the moment, it's difficult to know how you can actually say how robust and how mature is the AI service that's embedded in this overall SaaS-based service I'm buying. Where's the standard that tells you this AI is actually more secure than that AI? It doesn't exist.
Right.
Yeah,
that's correct.
So,
and like
talking
about the security, then it comes to, as Tim mentioned and Derek also talked about it, like embedding this entire monitoring and security into the AI pipelines is the best practice approach. And this can actually help us, validate all the inputs that we are getting from the users, as well as like there's a very simple and clear example nowadays that a simple prompt can change the entire behavior of the entire system and can be used for maybe as a C2 or something else. So we need to of course have the data governance inside LLM and the RAG system, not outside it. Make sure that everything like going and being processed through the entire AI models is like protected and being monitored. So security is like one of the things that should be embedded within the AI pipelines that we have. Either it is our SaaS API or maybe within our local system that we have.
So a question, absolutely true, but a question here from Mo Patel. So what are the new KPIs for monitoring non-deterministic AI security in real time? In fact, can you actually have a KPI? Because it may change on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
And I want to throw into that a comment that we discussed yesterday in the prep call, which was I think Derek, you mentioned that generative AI, Gen AI, is a new attack surface. This isn't just about protecting our perimeter, even though our perimeter is a Swiss cheese, as we all know, and it's as certainly post COVID it's pure the perimeter is the endpoint, etc. But there is a brand new attack surface that we're going to have to monitor.
Yeah, absolutely. We are, and a shout out to Mo Patel, who used to work beside me until last year. Fantastic ex-colleague of mine.
You had a plant in the audience, is what you're saying.
Well, I didn't know that until he appeared just now, and it's hopefully he's doing well and getting on great in other places. Yeah, it does. This additional attack surface really concerns me. I know Mo's asking about the new KPIs. We've talked about some of them here. Without going into some of the specifics, we have talked about putting in some of the runtime controls, the kill switches, understanding, dynamically monitoring that pipeline so that we're able to understand what these risks are, etc. But my big concern is still pace. I've never seen anything, Tom, where we've introduced the technology and we've introduced this level of risk without fully understanding the level of risk. We come from a risk background, all of us,
Yeah.
where anytime we implement any large systems, it could be a CRM, it could be an ERP, large systems that we've all implemented. We spend time, we do
Yeah.
due diligence, we understand
Well,
risk, the modeling, the frameworks, and then iteratively we go and put these things in place. Not now. We're just going out and buying access to these services, exposing our corporate data into it, and we're very much hoping that the ones that we've bought are going to keep us safe and secure. And in many ways, I think for some organizations, this is a car crash waiting to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird, isn't it? We can't take the kids to the zoo without doing a risk assessment, but we can throw generative AI out there and let's see what happens. It'll probably be all right.
I tell you what,
Where was the risk assessment?
I know. The thing it most reminds me of, but it's worse than, was the dot-com era. I'm old enough to, remember the early 2000s where
When the
every
dot-bomb went
company
off.
had to get online quickly, and banks, for example, were terrified they were going to be, replaced by online banks, and they, put huge amounts of money into new online offerings. And of course, one of the risk issues we haven't really talked about yet, of course, is the risk of wasting money on technology which doesn't actually deliver what you want. Some of the banks back in the early 2000s spent hundreds of millions building online propositions which closed because they didn't get enough customers. So there's also a risk of wasting money on the other side, of innovating too fast and ineffectively. That we have to try and control for. But that's the last time I think we saw something like this. And we've got to try and learn from that experience and make sure that, number one, we're spending judicious amounts of money on this. We're not just going mad because others are doing so. It's in a sort of gold rush mentality. But secondly, to Mo's point, we're going to need to find new ways of monitoring. And I think one of those, for example, is using agentic tools to monitor agentic tools. It sounds paradoxical. And I've already mentioned, I think, my favorite movie, I, Robot. There's a bit where Will Smith says, using robots to monitor robots, that's just stupid. Well, it's not if they're independent robots. If you've got two completely independent, a completely independent agent monitoring what other agents or another agent is doing, that gives you that improves your risk profile.
Well, you say that, but now they've got their own version of Reddit. Didn't Claude create one or something? They've got their own. They're all chatting to each other anyway. Come on, it's okay.
I think in a year's time, we'll be here talking about conspiracies amongst the agents.
Exactly. But it's a bit, we mentioned this yesterday. In fact, Satcham, you picked it up yesterday in our prep call about using AI to test the AI repositories. And there is a whole new market out there as well for, a number of .ai companies out there that are out there to test the validity and the integrity of your AI models. Because frankly, the AI problem, in inverted commas, is so complex, and the environments are so complex that humans can't even begin. We couldn't amass enough people to test it effectively and coherently. You need an AI to do it. So it's an inevitability. It's almost like they designed it this way.
So it's all about having the maker and the checker process. So we have AI for AI assurance, and what it's gonna do, it's gonna actually monitor the entire the transactions or the flows or maybe any of the packets that you are sending out. The entire behavior of the AI can be observed and can be test and maybe challenge or can be stopped with the help of another agentic AI models. And same thing we can always do with the help of having those two things, and then putting up the right trainings and the models, and putting up the right data. And it all comes to how we are separating the monitoring AI and as well as the production AI. So we should be having the two different BVCs or maybe the different isolations towards the monitoring AI, agentic AI systems, as well as how we have integrated for the production environment. So another example could be, for an example, if you would like to go ahead and do the vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. Nowadays, these things can be done with the help of agentic AI, and you can always have the tools installed within your maybe one of your VPS and have the MCPs running in within your private network. And then agentic AI can scan the entire network, prepare the report for you, do the exploitation and entire things. So these things are now becoming very easy and approachable for every users.
Yeah. And Alison has pointed out that actually I'm playing wrong. Just on Maltbook, the AI network, it's been shown there's human intervention after all. Never let the truth get in the way of a good conspiracy theory, Alison. Yeah, so a question here from Scott Hardy. Yeah, thank you, Alice. You're absolutely right to bring it up. Question here from Scott Hardy. Do you think that AI makes third-party risk management much more important? You may introduce policies, guardrails for your own business use, but what about third parties that are using it? We have no control over their use. Well, my initial thought is, any kind of third-party risk management program, you do have a certain level of control over it. But to a previous point, sometimes you're availing yourself of services that you don't even realize have AI built into them, or even they don't know they have AI built into it further down the supply chain. So I think this is a challenge, but I think it's bringing about a whole new paradigm of third-party risk management.
As I said earlier, it magnifies the third party risk is what it does to me. In many ways, I think we don't do a great job as an industry managing third party risk. We see a lot of the big breaches still come from weaknesses in that chain.
Yeah.
AI takes it then to a different level, and it makes it more difficult for us to. We're not doing great due diligence at the moment. It makes it really difficult to actually even do some of the more simple due diligence when we don't know what it is we're consuming. So I totally agree. I'm really concerned around what this means. A lot of the biggest breaches we're seeing are our supply chain. This elevates it.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true. And absolutely, AI makes third-party risk management very critical. It's just not a optional thing nowadays for the organization to just skip it, because everything that you are putting, it could be one of your employee has maybe sent thousands of those confidential information lines to the AI models, and AI just doesn't respect your controls or any boundaries that you have put in. It's just more about you need to have the third-party risk management as critically, or maybe you need to evolve the entire risk third party risk management within your organization as you grow with the AI and you bring the AI to the table. You need to have the third party risk management.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think this theme of third party or nth party risk management is actually probably the biggest issue here. I did a bit of historical analysis of big risk events in history, and some of the biggest risk events we've had, like the global financial crisis, for example, are where there's a complicated ecosystem where risk is being passed around and you can't track it. And that's true of a technology ecosystem with lots of providers and interconnected parties now passing risk around to each other or creating risk for each other through the use of AI tools in a way that no one can readily track. There's lots of other complicated systems that are trackable, like the air traffic control system. That's complicated, but it's trackable. It's finite and knowable, even though it's complex. But this has some of those attributes of unknowability that give risk managers the heebie-jeebies. We had a round table event for chief risk officers the other day, and this was the thing that they all voted was keeping them up at night. How can you say to your board or to your regulators, we've got a handle on third-party risk? At this moment in time, you're probably lying if you say you've got a handle on it.
You could have a bit of fun, Tim. I'm just saying you could ask your suppliers to tell you the mean time to kill rogue agents on the services that you're consuming from them. And I think you'll see a lot of scratching heads, I think. The minute you start actually getting into ask the detailed question around the governance, the performance and the management, the guardrails of what we're consuming, I think you'll find that they're not quite as transparent as what you'd like them to be honest. Do they really know percentage of actions that are being gated? AI incidents that are they're actually getting killed, shadow AI usage, percentage of agents that are running least privilege. I think you can actually start to get into some detail there, and I'm not convinced you'll get back the answers you want.
Yeah. And the fact with the move from coding to low code and now to just vibe coding with your feet on the desk and just talking to something to code for you, you really don't know currently what's actually being implemented and what agents it's using and where they're sitting and where they're getting their data from. It's just producing the results you want. And If any of that gets put into production, or at least of some kind of production support system, and you start killing these rogue agents, you could start killing your production systems in one way or another.
That's correct. You can put like more controls or policies or maybe the guardrails or anything as in like to protect shadow AI risk. But how you use AI, it all matters because the moment you have like any of your third party vendors like bringing in the AI to their workflows, you are becoming, of course, you are getting exposed and you are under the risk because your third party has brought the AI to their
Yep.
production system. Your production is like connected to their APIs. So this is how
Yep.
we need to make sure that, of course, this entire TPRM needs to be evolved as the AI is evolving and every other industry is requiring it.
So I need to bring this to a close. We've barely scratched the surface. It's been 40 minutes. We've barely scratched the surface of this. We've got so much and some fantastic interaction from the audience. Thank you all three of you. I'm going to go round you. I'm going to give you each. Oh, Blimey, we're running tight. I'm going to give you each maybe 20 seconds to answer the age-old question we ask every week, which is, what should our audience do when they get to their desks in the morning? As regards, getting a trusted security model for AI or AI bit, generative agentic or whatever you want to call it. Where should we even start? And Tim, I'm going to start with you. 15 seconds.
So when you get to your desk, spend 5 minutes thinking to yourself, where am I using AI today and where could it go wrong?
Nice. Nice. Like it. Satyam.
Yeah, so I mean, from my perspective, you should look after what you are actually giving to the AI and how what you are processing. Is it the confidential data or not? And then, of course, monitoring is one of the really good point here that keeping you, monitored and alerted what data is being pushed within your boundaries.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And finally, Derek.
I would do a bit of reading. I would suggest looking at NIST AI frameworks, so WASP top 10 for LLMs. I think try and increase your knowledge so that you understand what you should be looking at. Like what Satyam said, understand what it's running, focus in on where it can take actions. I would absolutely say that as well. That's where you're going to see the dangers and the breaches. Think about it as least privilege, just like we do with other things, but have a look at some of the frameworks. They can certainly help you get started.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you so much, all three of you, Tim, Satyam, and Derek. And Derek, once again, thank you for being this week's sponsor. That brings us to the end. Leaves me with only a couple of jobs to do. Firstly, the mug. Well, it's going to have to go just by sheer word count alone. It's going to go to Andrew. If I had 3 mugs to give out, I would give out 3, but unfortunately, it's just the one. So, Andrew, well done. I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's questions or comments. There was so much to talk about, but thank you. Please do. We do keep record of this. Please do reach out to any of the panelists afterwards on your preferred mediums. Probably LinkedIn, I would imagine, but whatever else you can get them on, as I'm sure they were. There's so much more to talk about. Secondly, we have one more teissTalk of the month to go, and not only that, not only is it live, but it's live and in person at Teiss London next week, next Thursday. So we will be talking about why your security team is burned out and what to do about it. We'll be doing that live in London. But if you're there, please do come and say hello. I will be there all day. I'm doing basically this all day. It's going to be a long day, a long, very fun and enjoyable day, nonetheless. So please do come and say hello. So once again, Tim, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Satyam, thank you.
Thank you so much.
And Derek, thank you.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And to our audience, stay secure, my friends.